Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism by Anne Applebaum is a powerful and deeply personal exploration of the rise of right-wing populism and authoritarianism across Western democracies. As a historian and journalist, Applebaum brings a unique perspective to the political transformations of the 21st century, especially within countries she knows intimately, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Eastern European nations like Poland and Hungary. The book combines memoir, political commentary, and intellectual history to explain how democracies are eroding and why some elites enable this decline. The premise, Applebaum begins Twilight of Democracy with a striking personal anecdote, a New Year's Eve party she hosted in Poland in 1999. At the time, the guests, journalists, intellectuals, and politicians, were largely center-right and united in their support for liberal democracy, NATO expansion, and European integration. 2 decades later, she notes that many of these former friends and allies have diverged sharply, with some aligning themselves with authoritarian populist regimes and conspiratorial ideologies. This moment of reflection sets the tone for the book. Applebaum's central thesis is that authoritarianism is not simply a mass movement from the bottom up. It is often enabled and driven by members of the elite, writers, thinkers, media personalities, politicians, who abandon democratic principles in exchange for power, status, or ideological conformity. The role of the clerks. A major theme of the book is the role of what Applebaum calls the clerks, a term borrowed from French intellectual Julien Benda's classic La Trahison des Clercs, the treason of the intellectuals. These clerks are members of the intelligentsia who trade their moral integrity for proximity to power. Instead of defending truth and democratic norms, they become propagandists for authoritarian movements, spreading lies, distorting facts, and sowing division. Applebaum gives several examples of such clerks in various countries. In Poland, former dissidents and conservative thinkers once committed to liberalism have embraced nationalist and illiberal politics under the Law and Justice Party, PAS. In Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's regime has used media control and nationalism to suppress dissent and consolidate power, with the assistance of intellectuals and journalists willing to serve the new system. In the UK and the US, populist leaders like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump have been similarly aided by elites who rationalize or amplify falsehoods and conspiracy theories. The authoritarian personality and the lure of conspiracy. Applebaum is careful to point out that authoritarianism is not limited to any one ideology. Rather, it is a psychological and socio-political phenomenon that appeals to certain types of people, those who crave order, hierarchy, and clarity over complexity and ambiguity. These individuals often feel alienated by globalization, multiculturalism, or changing social norms. In this context, populist leaders offer a simple narrative. A corrupt elite betrayed the nation, and only a strong man can restore it. Conspiracy theories play a critical role in this narrative. Applebaum argues that modern authoritarian movements often rely on conspiracy thinking as a tool to undermine democratic debate and civil discourse. Whether it's QAnon in the United States, Soros conspiracies in Eastern Europe, or Brexit-related disinformation in the UK, the spread of fantastical, emotionally satisfying untruths fuels polarization and discredits traditional institutions. In many cases, intellectuals become key disseminators of these theories, not because they believe them to be literally true, but because they serve a political function. Conspiracies help build an alternative reality in which enemies are everywhere, dissent is treason, and loyalty is the supreme virtue. Nostalgia and nationalism. Another crucial element in the rise of authoritarianism, according to Applebaum, is nostalgia. Many populist movements are driven by a longing for an idealized past, a time when the nation was great, traditional values were unchallenged, and society was more homogeneous. This nostalgia is often selective and mythologized, ignoring historical injustices or complexities. In Eastern Europe, it can take the form of longing for pre-communist national pride, in the UK for imperial grandeur, in the US for a time before civil rights movements reshaped the social order. Populist leaders exploit this nostalgia to justify exclusionary policies, cultural purity, and rigid definitions of national identity. Anyone who challenges these narratives, journalists, academics, minorities, is labeled as an outsider or enemy. Applebaum's own experience living in Poland gives her unique insight into how this nostalgia operates. She notes how Polish populists have rewritten history to minimize the country's complicity in the Holocaust, vilify dissenters, and elevate a heroic nationalist narrative. The same process can be seen in Hungary, where Orban has revived authoritarian symbols and rewritten school curricula to glorify Hungary's past. The erosion of institutions. Applebaum devotes significant attention to how institutions, courts, media, elections, are gradually weakened under authoritarian populism. Unlike 20th century fascism or communism, today's authoritarians often work within democratic systems, slowly hollowing them out from within. Elections still happen, but they are increasingly manipulated through gerrymandering, media bias, or disinformation. Courts still exist, but they are packed with loyalists. Media still functions, but independent voices are drowned out or discredited. In this context, democratic backsliding is not always dramatic. It is incremental. Applebaum uses the metaphor of a twilight, a slow dimming of democratic light rather than a sudden blackout. The danger lies in the normalization of anti-democratic behavior and the apathy that can follow. Personal costs and moral choices. Twilight of Democracy is also a deeply personal book. Applebaum recounts the emotional toll of losing friends and colleagues to authoritarian ideologies. She is candid about the disorientation that comes from realizing people you once admired now support demagogues or promote falsehoods. This betrayal is not just political, it's moral. Yet Applebaum insists that individuals still have agency. The turn toward authoritarianism is not inevitable. People make choices, and these choices matter. Even in the face of pressure or disillusionment, intellectuals have a responsibility to defend truth, pluralism, and democratic values. She concludes with a call to courage, particularly among elites who have more influence and freedom to resist. The clerks who betray democracy may be loud, but others can choose integrity over convenience. Criticisms and reception. Twilight of Democracy has received both praise and critique. Many commentators have lauded Applebaum's insight, moral clarity, and willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The book has been described as timely and essential reading for understanding contemporary threats to democracy. Some critics, however, argue that Applebaum underplays the role of economic inequality and neoliberalism in fueling populist anger. While she emphasizes cultural and psychological factors, others suggest that material conditions, like wage stagnation, job loss, or housing crises, are central to understanding voter discontent. Others have questioned the narrow focus on elite betrayal, suggesting that populist movements have broader, more complex social bases than Applebaum implies. Still, the book's strength lies in its accessible narrative and thought-provoking questions about loyalty, truth, and moral responsibility.